Alright, so now that we have our footage all prepared, we're ready to start figuring out or finding out what our blocking poses are for the first blocking pass. Again, if you look on Canvas, there are 2 blocking passes required. So you'll do your blocking pass 1, which are all of your key or main poses, or I guess we could call them extreme poses as well. And they're just going to be the extreme poses in the animation. Usually when we're talking about character performance, we're mostly looking at contacts. So we're probably going to be looking at a lot of Haley's poses where we take a step. And on a contact, again, if you refer back to either our walk cycle or our run and jump, those contacts happen when the forward leading leg hits the ground on the heel. So usually that foot's not entirely planted. It's the very moment in which that heel touches the ground. So we're going to look for those poses and any other ones that we might consider sort of an extreme difference in position. So let's go ahead and pull up our footage and open this again in QuickTime. So I'll right click on this. We'll go to Open With, and let's open it in QuickTime. And while this is open, I'm also going to use some type of text editing or app to start recording all of my poses. And this is something you'll want to keep so that you can always refer to it when you're setting up your poses in Maya. So I'm going to go ahead and on my keyboard hit the Windows key and let's type in Word. I'm going to use Notepad actually. So I'll type in Note and let's open up Notepad. And in here we will do blocking pass 1. And at this point, again, we're just going to pick out our extremes and start recording that information. So I'm going to go through here and let's scrub and find our poses. So I'm going to find the first pose here where I can see Haley. So this one's a little different, we'll say, because our character starts off screen, so we don't know what the action is when the animation actually starts. Ideally, you would have that in frame, so you know where to begin. So Haley will probably have to make up that pose. And so I'm going to call it frame 0, even though we can't see the actual character. So you're going to have some sort of default pose before you start your animation. And so in this case, there's probably going to be some sort of relaxed pose where our character is standing there. So even though I can't see it here in frame, there needs to be some sort of starting pose so we're not just starting abruptly. And then, so I'll call it frame 0. That's exactly where our animation is going to start. And so you'll always want to do frame 0. Let's hit enter. We'll go here and let's find our next pose. And that's going to be the next extreme here. And so it looks like I'm going to call it frame 27. So like I said, in this case, we're taking strides or steps, and I'm going to call it 27 because that's when the foot or that forward leading leg is on the heel. And so we'll go ahead and we'll call that again frame 27. Let's go through here. This one's kind of difficult. It's probably going to be frame 50 or 51. I'm going to call it frame... I'm going to do frame 51. It looks like that heel is mostly planted on the ground at that point. It looks like our next contact is 65. And let's keep going here. Our next contact is at 78. 96. So again, I'm just looking at that whatever leg is leading forward and looking for that heel to touch the ground. So the foot, on most of these is not planted yet. And then it looks like we have a settle pose here. We settle in at about frame. It looks like it ends at frame 112. Now with this, I would probably deviate from my reference a little bit to get a better resting or settling pose. So it looks like our character at this point, the spine or back is still tilted forward, and I would maybe want to bring that up and have the arms come to the side as sort of a resting pose. But these would be my blocking passes for stage one. So again, we are just looking for the contacts for taking a lot of strides and steps. Let me see here. Just bang on. So once you get pass one figured out, we'll also want to figure out your blocking pass part two. So you will be required to do a minimum of 2 passes. You'll submit both pass one and pass two, and you can do more than that, but it's a minimum of at least 2 to at least get all of your key poses in when you start animating. So I'm going to start figuring out my blocking pass stage 2. So I'll hit enter here, and down below I'm going to do blocking pass 2. And really this is going to be the frames between your key extremes or key poses. If your character is taking steps, a lot of times that just it ends up being the pass. So when your character's leg or the person's leg is actually passing the planted leg, those tend to be those in-between poses. If you're not sure, just do the frame that lies directly between your key poses. So for example, here my first blocking pass was on stage, or my pose is on frame 0. My second one is on frame 27, and so you would do the number that's between those two. So if you just take 27 divided by 2, we get that frame in between. But I'm going to look here. I'm just going to scrub through and see if I can find that. And it looks like we've got a stove or an oven in our way. But I'm going to guess it's somewhere around frame 18-ish. Yeah. So I'm going to call it somewhere around there, maybe frame 16. So it would be helpful if your subject is in frame the whole time. We'll do frame 16. Let's see, our next set here we have frames 27 and 51. So we're going to look for the frames in between those 2 key poses. So let's go to frame 27 and then scrub through. And so, like I said, a lot of times this just ends up being a pass. So it's probably going to be, I would call it somewhere around frame 41. If we look at the left leg there, it's getting ready to pass the planted leg. And so I would call that my next pose there, or my in-between. Let's see, the next set here is between frame 51 and 65. So let's go to frame 51. And then let's scrub through and look for that pass. So it's probably right around here. I'm going to call it 58 on that one. Let's see, what's our next frame? So we're looking for the frames between 65 and 78. And I'm going to do 72 there. Let's see, our next set of frames, we're looking between 78 and 96. So 78 is here. I'm going to call it 90. And then our next or last set is, it's the frames between 96 and 112. So let's go to frame 96, and then let's see. So there's not really a pass with this one, just because the leg just slightly comes forward to go into our settling pose here. So probably what I'll do on this foot is I will look for the moment where this foot kind of rolls up on the ball, and then it gets ready to leave the ground. I'm going to look for that moment or frame right before it leaves the ground. And so it looks like at frame 101, it's still planted, oriented in the same position. And then on 102, it starts to come forward a little bit. Let's just go ahead, we'll go back before the foot starts to move forward. And we'll call our last pose there for pass 2. We're going to call it 101. And so now we have both sets of passes figured out. And what we would do is, once we're in Maya, we would only do one pass at a time. So we would start with blocking pass 1. We would go through and block all the poses on frame 0, 27, 51, 65, 78, 96, and 112. We would block all those out first. And then once we were done with those, then we would come back in and do the other poses that we planned out here. I'm going to go ahead and save this. So I'll go to File and Save As. And then go ahead and call this and then if I go to the M drive, I should have a text document. Yeah. And so we'll have these on hand as needed, so we can start blocking these out in Maya. I'm going to stop here, and then we will look at setting up your project in Maya.